Perfect. Thank you.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. What a remarkable moment that everyone just shuffled into their seats at 9:05 as per schedule. I can assure you that very rarely happens in my world. So thank you very much. And welcome. My name is Tim Sale, and sure, great. Morning. My name is Tim Sale, and on behalf of the Canadian Foreign Intelligence History Project, I want to welcome you here, and welcome you here to Library and Archives Canada, and to thank Library and Archives Canada for making today's event possible. Library and Archives Canada is here on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. I want to just begin with a few housekeeping remarks, if you will, and especially a thank you to 3 organizations that helped make sure that we could have graduate students here with us today. So I want to thank the Bill Graham Center for Contemporary International History, the North American Society for Intelligence History, and the Canadian Association for Security and Intelligence Studies. I didn't do the acronyms, I did the whole titles, all by memory. Thank you so much to those groups for helping defray the costs of travel and the ticket prices for students to be with us here today. We have enough chairs for everyone, it looks like, at the moment, which is great, but we do have a very full house, but it seems, I was going to say something about making sure to sit down, but we look good. We're all here. Just one final note, and a congratulations to Professor Jason Bell, who's going to be here with us today. He's the author of Cracking the Nazi Code, and Jason will be signing books tonight at 7 p.m. at Perfect Books on Elgin Street, so you can get a signed copy of his new book. But I'm now going to introduce Christine Ivory, the Assistant Deputy Minister from the Collections Sector, to provide us with some introductory remarks. So, welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous, et bienvenue à la salle Béland de Bibliothèque et Archives Canada. Welcome to the Alfred Calhoun Library and Archives. I would like to acknowledge that Library and Archives Canada, or LAC as we like to call it, holds stories of First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis Nation from across the northern part of Turtle Island, now known as Canada. We recognize that without truth, there can be no reconciliation. I also acknowledge that we're meeting today on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. Leslie Weir is not me, as you can tell. She sends her regrets and is deeply apologetic that she can't be here for this important event. What she doesn't know is that when she asked me to speak to you this morning, she had no sense of how excited I was, and that's because my background is international affairs. I am a recent addition to Library and Archives, but for the last 15 years, I have worked at the Library of Parliament and was responsible for the division that supports parliamentarians on international affairs, defense, international security. So this is something I know a lot about and care deeply about. I would like to thank Carleton University and the Canadian Foreign Intelligence History Project for hosting a symposium on accessing historic records on intelligence and international affairs. This topic is of crucial importance to our society. I would like to welcome you all, the participants, as well as our colleagues from across the academic sector, the media, the Government of Canada, and the Office of the Information Commissioner. At LAC, we are very interested in this subject as well. You may have noticed that many of our LAC employees are here today, as well as the presenters and panel chairs from our organization. I'll make them here: Melody Béland, Véronique Gendron, Christina Lilico, and Marcel Saint-Glace. As you already know, LAC has a key role to play in giving researchers, the media, and citizens access to our history. This includes the historical records of over 300 Government of Canada departments, agencies, both active and defunct. This access is the cornerstone of an open and democratic society. It is essential for transparency in government, as much for the past and current policies, decisions, as well as the delivery of programs and services. It's all good. Okay. Did you know that LAC preserves over 200 linear kilometers of historical records across multiple facilities in the National Capital Region, Winnipeg, and Vancouver? And I'm really embarrassed to say that at the Library of Parliament, we used to boast of our 18 kilometers. So I'm very happy to have joined this organization and the breadth of and the extent of historical records we are the guardians of. It is quite a challenge, as you can imagine, to be responsible for so much information. We want our users to have access to documents as efficiently as possible and in line with our legal obligations. Our institution is committed to responding to the recommendations made by the Information Commissioner of Canada in her systemic investigation and to collaborating with our GC partners on bigger initiatives such as, I'm sure this is the word you've been waiting for all morning, declassification. We published our Access to Information and Privacy Action Plan on the LAC website last year and are reporting semi-annually in June and December of each year on our progress against these objectives. A budget of $106 million over 6 years has been allocated to LAC starting in 2022 to reduce our ATIP backlog and support LAC in responding to class action litigation. With this resourcing, we grew our ATIP team significantly. There are now over 150 employees in what is now the ATIP branch. We have also hired employees across the department that are critical in supporting ATIP responses, such as the digitization team and the staff who transport the material from storage to our offices so it can be processed. We have already reached a number of exciting milestones. And I say we, but I arrived at LAC in August, so I can take zero credit for this, but this wonderful team has been working diligently to reach these impressive milestones. We've reduced the backlog of overdue access to information requests by 39% since April 22. We have taken significant steps to ensure we are responding to new incoming requests in a timely way, often with reduced wait times. In the spring, we launched new pages about ATIP at LAC on our website, including a tool to guide clients in making the right types of requests. As experienced researchers, please let us know whether these changes are improving your experience or if there are other things you would like to see. This is really truly an open invitation, and it's why we're meeting here today, or in part why we're meeting here today. LAC also onboarded to the Government of Canada ATIP online application portal, as all the GC departments are required to do. And there's even more. We have also put in place new procedures, bringing exciting results. Our team members will be sharing more about that with you today in their presentations. We are working to turn our efforts toward proactive opening of material while also responding to the growing ATIP requests. Even though we have taken several steps in the right direction, we know that there's so much more we need to do. One of the most important steps is to be here speaking with clients, such as yourselves, to get to know how things are going, to know the bottlenecks, the pressure points, and that is why we really welcome the opportunity to participate in this event with you today. I know that the discussions are the continuation of a fruitful dialogue between all parties. Should you have specific questions or concerns, our panelists and LAC's ATIP team is available to assist you at the designated tables throughout the room, and we're also available anytime you want to reach us. Sur ce, je vous souhaite un enrichissant symposium, et j'aimerais maintenant inviter Sam Eberlee, qui nous vient de l'Université de Toronto. Sam is a PhD candidate with the Department of History, and he will be launching our first panel. Thank you, everyone, and have a great session today.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Sure, why don't we call up our three panelists? The subject of this first panel, locating historical intelligence records. All right.
Are you covering the red stick in front of you?
I am not.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry for that. So, the subject of this first panel, locating historical intelligence records, is really an essential starting point for all of the work that we do in Canadian intelligence and international history. Our three panelists are Alan Barnes, a senior fellow at the Centre for Security, Intelligence and Defence at Carleton University's Norman Paterson School of International Affairs. Melody Béland is a senior archivist for declassification here at Library and Archives Canada. And she's also going to draw on past experience as a portfolio lead for Global Affairs Records. And Cooney is a senior archivist at Global Affairs Canada's Intelligence Bureau. Collectively, our three panelists will give us a broad horizontal overview of the various places that Canadian intelligence records are tucked away in archives, in record groups, and at departments. And they'll also give us some specific advice on how to navigate Global Affairs and Library and Archives Canada's holdings. So, we'll hear from all three panelists, and then we'll transition into a Q&A discussion. And with that, I will turn things over to Alan.
Thank you very much. We have the first slides on the clicker or whatever. Okay, great. I'm very pleased to be here with you this morning. I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce the research guide to records on foreign intelligence in Canada from 1945 to 2000. We'll be spending a lot of today talking about the ATIP process, on how to access records held by the government. But even before that, researchers face a major challenge in just determining where these records are actually located. So it's, before you can submit an effective access request, you really need to know what you're asking for instead of just a fishing expedition. So the CFIHP, the Canadian Foreign Intelligence History Project, has created a research guide to records of foreign intelligence in Canada from 1945 to 2000. And just to emphasize that this research guide focuses on foreign intelligence, that is, intelligence to support decisions by the government on defense and foreign policies, and to distinguish it from what most Canadians might be more familiar with, the security intelligence field, which deals with intelligence related to domestic security threats and so on. So we're interested in foreign intelligence, and it's an area that hasn't received, I think, enough historical coverage in Canada, so we're trying to encourage that. The time period is 1945 to 2000. The reason it ends in 2000 is because there's very, very few records on foreign intelligence that are available after that. Hopefully we can extend our research guide as more records are released and more finding aids are made available. And we don't concentrate on records from the Second World War previous, partly because there's very few foreign intelligence records, but mainly because the main focus of our research efforts is in the post-war period. And I should also point out that many of the records that we're dealing with, since they were created as part of an interdepartmental intelligence community, those same records can be found in many places, often in different levels of restriction. So these are interdepartmental committee minutes, interdepartmental memoranda that are exchanged between departments, intelligence assessments that are distributed across government and so on. So what makes this sort of an interesting treasure hunt is that the document you're looking for won't necessarily reside in the department that created it. You might find a very useful copy of it in some other department. So that's why it's so useful to have an idea of where these documents might be in the various departments when we start looking for them. So where are all these records? So the first place to start is Library and Archives Canada. So this list of finding aids on the slide here indicates a number of record groups that hold intelligence records. Now, many of these record groups hold many other kinds of records as well, but there are significant quantities of intelligence records in all of these record groups. Now, some of the records in those record groups held by LAC. Question? Or?
Yeah, Alan, will these briefings that we're seeing today be available to us anywhere?
We will be posting it on our website. It'll probably take us some time to get it sorted out, but at some page.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the records are listed in the online LAC search function, which is very useful, but the reality is many of the records held by LAC are not searchable on that online function. So to find those records, you need to get into the various finding aids, which are either paper copies or sometimes they're also digital copies. But they're all kept separately. Actually, the research center on the other side of this floor has got walls full of boxes of finding aids. And so you really have to spend an awful lot of time going through those finding aids to find those that might have relevant intelligence records. So it's a major challenge in figuring out where in those finding aids those records might exist. Another problem I should flag is that a number of the finding aids that LAC has are restricted. That means they contain classified information, potentially classified information, and they can't be released to the public until they have been reviewed. The challenge is those restricted finding aids sit in some spot in LAC, and until somebody asks to look at them, or until somebody puts in an access request for them, that's where they stay. But if the researcher doesn't know these finding aids exist, there's no way they can put in a request for it. So I would strongly urge LAC, as a matter of policy and practice, that these finding aids, any finding aids that are currently restricted, should be proactively reviewed and a severed version made available to the public. As it is now, it's really a hit and miss. There was a couple of very valuable finding aids that I was able to identify, but only because one of the LAC archivists gave me a heads up. So if I was just coming in off the street trying to find it, there'd be no way I could identify it. Ultimately, I put in access requests for it, got a severed version, and it was extremely useful. But unless LAC adopts a practice of proactively reviewing and making these available, it's a real roadblock for researchers. Okay, but that's LAC, but other departments. What's interesting is some of the other key departments still hold these historic records. So for example, the Privy Council Office still holds records dating back to 1942. And often these records are held in what are called within the department special registries. And these registries are separate from the regular departmental information management system. And quite often the process of transferring those records from the special registries to LAC just doesn't happen, or it's very much more restricted. So Privy Council Office and Foreign Affairs does have these special registries, and we'll be hearing more about the holdings of the GAC registry later in this presentation. The Department of National Defense, their Directorate of History and Heritage, also has a separate archive of historical documents. That's a slightly different situation. Those records are essentially held for the purposes of writing official histories, official military histories, and so on. So they only keep certain records, and very few of those are dedicated to intelligence matters. But there are intelligence documents spread out in many, many of the other files there. And so in this case, it really is a matter of sort of sitting down and going through these files to find the individual intelligence reports. So in particular, there are sets of files related to the Chiefs of Staff Committee from 1945 until the early 60s, and mixed in with those minutes and meeting materials are a large number of intelligence reports as well. The Communications Security Establishment also has holdings of historical records, and we've recently been able to get a finding aid for that collection. Much of it's redacted, but much other interesting material remains, and again, this will give some access to those records. Okay, so that's where the records lie, in these different places around town, but clearly it's really difficult to get a hold of them. So what CFIHP has done is created this research guide, and it's on our website, as noted at the bottom of the slide there. And it's in 3 major parts. So there's an overview of about 15 pages where it describes in broad terms the holdings in the different departments and how the records are handled, so the process that goes through to be made available to researchers. Then there's a list of finding aids, so it's about 15 or 20 pages long with information on various finding aids that we've been able to discover. And then, most significantly, there's a collection of the finding aids themselves. So we have taken all the finding aids. Some of them were on the LAC online search function. Some of them were paper copies in the research room here. Some of them were PDF copies we obtained either through ATIPS or from the archivist here, and so on. So essentially here in one place for the first time is a critical mass of documentation of the finding aids for actually locating the files that you're interested in. Now, some of these finding aids, might be 30, 40, 50 pages long, and they only have half a dozen intelligence files. But probably about a third of them, so 20, 25 or so, have substantial quantities, are either entirely made up of intelligence records or very, very substantial quantities of intelligence records. So there's a great deal of meat here for researchers. The largest number of these finding aids comes from LAC, but there are about 20 from National Defense, the Directorate of History and Heritage. There's one extremely useful one from Global Affairs, and 3 from Privy Council Office. So the Privy Council Office finding aids I don't think are yet complete, but we're still pushing, and hopefully we can fill out that shortly. So as I said, all of these are available online at the CFIHP website, as mentioned on the slide. Can I change that slide there somehow? Your button seems to be... No? There we go. Okay, I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the Canadian Foreign Intelligence History Project, because it's one thing to have all these finding aids and so on, but you also need to get a hold of the records. So the finding aids will enable researchers to build their own requests or create their own requests for things they're particularly interested in. But a group of us in CFIHP have been undertaking a major campaign of access requests over the last 6 or 8 years, and we've built up a very sizable collection of foreign intelligence records which we've put in the database. So the CFIHP is an informal collaboration of researchers who are working together to try and improve access to foreign intelligence records in Canada. So we've created this database of over 1,000 archival files, and from those files we've extracted significant documents and so on. So, for example, in a file of 400 pages dealing with Joint Intelligence Committee minutes, we've extracted copies of each of the minutes so they're more easily usable. So the database as it exists now is largely shaped by the research interests of those people who are contributing to it. So there may be material in the finding aids that you see that you're quite interested in, but no one else has asked for it before, so it's not in the database. So what we're hoping is that with access to the database, more people will become involved in submitting requests for this kind of material and hopefully adding it to the overall database that we have created. So all those records are out there waiting for somebody to ask for them, and we're hoping that maybe some of you. So, in conclusion, I just want to invite you to take a look at the database. Well, first of all, take a look at the finding aids to see what may be of interest, and I would very much encourage you to submit access requests for this material, and hopefully the discussion in each of the rest of the day will explain how to do that most effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne, for the invitation to present today and the organization of this symposium for CFIHP. Before becoming an archivist in the classification, I spent almost 8 years as a portfolio archivist in international affairs. This experience really allowed me to develop a deep understanding of the record created and or maintained by the Department of External Affairs, which is now Global Affairs Canada. I probably help most of you researchers right now in the room to get access to the record if they were on RH25. So thank you for giving me that experience, and also you're welcome for your access. I know this whole world of the archives can feel like an obstacle course. It's hard to understand, it's hard to get access, it's hard to navigate. Let me tell you, as a portfolio archivist, we feel the same way. The archive are dependent on how the information was managed at the department. IM, in a sense, is vital. Without it, we don't know neither what's there. So yes, we would love to have it easy. We would love a Google search keyword thing, but it's not possible, not yet. I want you to imagine right now the Burj Khalifa 3 times stacked up, or CN Tower 5.5 times stacked up. This is how high the collection will be if we stack each global affair, paper, image, everything up together and create tower. So we are talking about 3,000 meters of material. So it's needless to say that this is literally a mountain of record. This is why it is an absolute challenge for me today to try to present to you an overview of the kind of record held in the collection at LAC. But what I can do is provide you with some key codes to break the archive. By that I mean more of the detailed information on to help you understand information management and hopefully help you narrow your research a little bit more. So, but before I go into detail of the phone, I need to explain one word that is really useful, that is used at LAC, and it's MECAN. MECAN is our internal database. However, if you use the collection search of the new LAC webpage, now you can use it as a research tool. So you might hear ID number, you might hear item number, you might hear MECAN number. They are all the same. If you go in the collection search and you click on advanced search, until you select collection and phone, the item ID number will be grayed out and you won't be able to put anything. But if you select collection and phone in the database, besides the database, you'll get that new tab open and you can write down the MECAN number there. Why I'm explaining that, which is super technical, it's because I will be providing some MECAN number for you later on, and it's going to be easy for you. So now, the Department of External Affairs, RG25. RG means record group. Each department has an RG number. There's, like I say, approximately 3,000 liters of material. It is not just textual. There are also photographs, video, maps, audio. I'm no longer surprised what we can see when we open boxes sometimes. The date range is 1803 to 1995. Some records are post-1995 up until 2005, but it is really limited. And if we take the analogy of the mountain, it probably is the grain of salt in a mountain. Therefore, that means not everything had been transferred, because we're in 2023, almost 24, unbelievable. The transfer depends on the life cycle of information management and the records, as well as the retention period that is established by the department and not LAC. It also depends on the operational needs of those records, the business value, and the archival value. Because yes, not everything is archival. I would also say that it depends on the resources available at the department to do disposition and then do the transfer to LAC. Now, the phone is structured mostly in series following file classification. This is not the case for all phones, but I'm only talking about RH25 today. There's a few of them. If you know a little bit, there's a few of them. There's the 1939, the 1940. Under the 1940, there's sub-series for other part of the classification system. And then there's the EA63. Those are the major ones. EA63 is the one that started in 1963 and finished around 1995. It is the biggest one. We have a lot of records from that period. EA63 used a block system classification, so each block represents a specific topic. So the advantage of the EA63 classification system is that once you figure what a number means, primary, secondary, or tertiary, it is easy to navigate and have an idea what the file about. Please note, for country, individual, and organization names, they use words. So there is no number that means something super secret and trying to hide anything. The phone also contains some series that are described by topic, event, office, or type of record. You can have embassy series. In terms of event, you can have an Olympic game, Montreal Olympic Game series, or offices, library, Jeux Léger, or type of record, which is another very big series, is a briefing book. You're gonna find any briefing book, it's by the type of record and not by the topic, or by the classification of the system. So where do you find intelligence record and how to recognize them? A lot of numbers, I'm sorry. The first one is the special S series, small s series, which is a sub-series. This series is the original secret and top secret file system. It was established in 1940 that ran concurrently with the main registry, the 40 series. The majority of the files were transferred into the 50,000 series that continue up into the 1960s. This sub-series is organized numerically, and the subject were given the next consecutive file number. So in this case, number don't necessarily mean anything, but if it used one time and you have a new file about it, it's going to be the same file number. Similar subjects are filed together, which can be expanded with letter, and that's why you find the B's or the A's after the number. The sub-series subjects are dealing with the conduct of the Second World War, the shape of post-war institutions, including the UN and NATO, and the bilateral relation between Canada and US, including the Permanent Joint Board of Defense, work on atomic energy as well as communist activities. It also included in this sub-series are files relating to Canada's position on peace with the Axis power as well as relation with numerous countries throughout the world. So the MICAN number is the first one. You can use it for research. Finding aids number, and there's more than one finding aids, it's 25-7. The date range is 1940-64, and how to recognize them, there's always a bracket with an S number, so that's how you know it's coming from that series. The second one is the top secret registry, the 50,000 sub-series. So post-World War II, the expansion of the federal government, the new international independence of managing our own international affair, and the overall activity became too much for the previous system to expand properly. Therefore, they created the 50,000 series. That's why they transfer most of the files in there. It is also organized numerically, and subjects were given the next consecutive file number, but similar subjects were also filed together, which can be recognized with letters. Secret and top secret material filed in this system includes records relating to atomic energy, NATO, UN, the Korean War, security and intelligence matter, export of arms, Commonwealth relations, International Commission for Supervision and Control in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, relation with various countries around the world, and a variety of other issues related to Canada foreign policy in the post-war period. Again, MICAN number, finding aids 25-65, the date range 1942 to 1963. It's really en chevauchement with the previous one because it's the same period of time. And how to recognize them, basically, it always starts with a 50,000 number. The next one, which is also a sub-series, is the Block 29. This one is from the EA63 system, classification system. Again, I said earlier that the EA63 system is the block number represents the topic. So basically this one is pretty straightforward, 29, intelligence. And subjects are wide, from release of information, exchange of information, vulnerability activities, foreign activities in Canada, passport security, etc. The collection of this sub-series is not complete. GAC still have many of those files. Sorry, Liam. You will see that this one, the finding aids, is 25-6, bracket 29. Do not forget the bracket 29 because you're going to get all the 83 block finding aids and you don't want them because that's a lot of records. It is severed. And how to recognize that, the file that are from that classification system, it starts with 29. Again, this one I would suggest that if you get acclimated with the secondary, which one will be something around politics, or I don't know, each number will mean something up to the tertiary. The final one is the Intelligence Special Registry. It is a series and not a sub-series. This one is completely different. It is not based on file classification, it is based on who transferred it. It was Liam's division a couple years ago, a decade ago, I think. They did a batch of this position and then they sent that to LAC. The subjects are as wide as in the Block 29 subseries, and finding aids is 25-55. This one is also severed, but accessible as a PDF on the website, on the series level, or probably at the accession, but it is accessible. And how do you organize that? Well, good luck, because it's all file classification system. But if you get the gist of the file classification system, you can understand how this one is also made and what they need. So I would say, as final word, most record in Arch 25 are at file level. So if you do a research on the collection search, that means that you don't technically need a finding aids, because you can do a keyword search under the specification of Arch 25, and the database is going to provide you with any file that we have about that. However, I mentioned some finding aids are severed, and very few that has not been uploaded into item level description, they are still available in PDF. Either severed or completed, it is available. Therefore, it is always a good idea to consult the finding aids, mostly for those Block 29 and Intelligence Special Registry series. I also want to address as a final word that separate finding aids, and to be fair, the information comes from the department. So LAC depends on the department to either advise on doing the severing or sever it themselves. If it's individual name, it's something easy in-house, agent can do it. But they are the subject matter expert on foreign intelligence. So I, as an archivist, couldn't do a severing of things that for me it looks like potato, but for them it means special operation. So again, we depend heavily in IAM. Also, I want to mention that finding aids are created by the department and not by LAC. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for organizing this, and our campus colleagues for hosting us.
Yes.
But I hope that my presentation will actually kind of dovetail really nicely with what Melody just gave to you. I'm going to discuss, of course, Global Affairs Canada's historical and national security and intelligence information, where it is, I find it, don't blame me. So just very quickly, I'm going to give you a bit of background on Global Affairs. Why does Global Affairs have intelligence records? The location and access of these records, and I think I'm going to try and spend most of my time on that, and I'm going to briefly just outline what our attempts to declassify some of these records and make it a bit easier for you to find them. So, Global Affairs Canada is responsible for ensuring the national security and intelligence activities of the Government of Canada align and contribute to Canada's foreign policy and foreign policy goals. The Minister has a pretty broad mandate in that, and the Global Affairs Canada is the Minister's department to make sure those come to fruition. As Melody has pointed out, the main repositories of our national security and intelligence records between 1946 and 2009 existed in something known as special registries. And we've generally, over the last 50 years, transferred quite a few of these records to Library and Archives Canada. I'll get into more specifics on that in a minute or so. between the 1970s and 2010. And generally for foreign intelligence records, we have a 30-year retention period on these, so we're coming due. And right now we estimate there's about 12,000 folders, and for the purposes of my presentation, a folder is the smallest unit that I can think of that is a metric that I can understand. It is literally the file folder that contains information. And that information, in some cases, you'll see that that file folder is empty, but that is still one folder. Some cases, there's one page in there. Some cases, it's 500 pages. You know? So one folder, we're not talking about files. We're talking about literally the physical folder that contains those records. So there's about 12,000 we estimate that are, I guess not in this building, but if you were to consult them, you'd probably look at them here. And the remnants, about another 5,000 folders are still housed in my office at Global Affairs. And what we have still at Global Affairs does date back to the 1940s, and we're trying our best to get it at the door and get it over here. Just how it breaks down. Now, Melody is giving you kind of a very good overview of what these, what we deal with over at Global Affairs. There's four main record series that have been in use by External Affairs and now Global Affairs since the 1940s. The first being the small S, as Melody pointed out. The second being the 50,000. And then the EA63, which officially ended in 1992, but unofficially continued going on until the 2010s in some instances in some areas of the department. The EA63 was replaced in the early 1990s by something called the RICS, which stands for the Records Information Classification System. But it is an acronym. So if you are looking for records that are post-1992, chances are they're actually still over at Global Affairs Canada in most instances. Then there's two others that Melody briefly mentioned. One is, we know it as a DL2 system. DL2 is the name of the my organization, what is now the Intelligence Bureau, what was in the immediate post-war period known as Defense Liaison 2. That dealt with the foreign intelligence. Defense Liaison 1 dealt with the military side of things. That has its own kind of classification system. Again, it's well numeric. It can be very confusing because it looks a lot like the 63 series. It's basically 12 blocks. Normally there's a single number followed by another number. Then, unlike the EA63 where they use the names of countries or people or whatever to describe them, the DL2 system actually makes it even more mysterious and uses a random code of numbers that even I don't quite understand how they came up with those numbers. But it stopped being used in about the 1960s when they consolidated all of that into the EA63. The other one is, for which, if we're going to place blame on the weird classification systems, we can place this squarely with the D&D. It's the Joint Intelligence Bureau records, which, of course, the Joint Intelligence Bureau was created in the 1950s and a large, responsible for topographic and human source information from conducted interviews with immigrants and defectors and all those sorts of people. In the 1960s, that came into External Affairs as the Special Research Bureau, and then eventually in the late 2000s was known as by its acronym ISIW, and was literally known as the Interview Division. In terms of the records that we have, so we have about, you can see the columns there. This is our estimate of what we have over at Library and Archives versus what we have still in our holdings at Global Affairs. The middle column kind of gives you a sense of what is open and what is closed. A lot of that is based on our understanding of what is publicly available on the Library and Archives website and the collection search, and so those numbers are not necessarily accurate, I will point out. For instance, even just that small S series, I can tell you right now that the number of closed records in that, right there I have 230. The actual number is 119. The reason being that there are 111 empty folders that are still publicly on the public facing website to say that they are closed, but they are empty folders. There's nothing, you know. And of course, when we get down to the EA63 and the other records, we have a sense of how many records are there, but we really have no sense of how open they are. That for our purposes, we often do our research and we come across, we open the box and we say, oh, this record's been released entirely by access to information, and we don't get that feedback from that, so it's always a bit of a surprise to us when that happens. But all that being said, we do generally have, we estimate that there's about 1/3 of our records are completely open. They're code 90, you can come in, you can sit down, you can read all about that stuff. And there's still 2/3 that remain classified. And that is just what I would like to spend my last couple minutes just talking about, how we're going to get over those classifications. So how are we declassifying them? In 2021, in the height of COVID, we got approval from our Deputy Minister to begin a declassification project over at Global Affairs. And the focus of that project was really to focus on records that were pre-1972. And there's a few reasons for this. One, as you can see the numbers, it kind of split that 12,000 right in half. So it is kind of a fairly sizable chunk of records that we're still looking at. It also, in 1972 was an important year for our, the roles that foreign affairs played in the intelligence community within Canada. Following, at the time they were the head of the Joint Intelligence Committee, and then the next year, well, they remained the chair of the committee. The Joint Intelligence Committee became the Intelligence Advisory Committee, and eventually passed over to PCO. In terms of foreign intelligence, 1972 is a very important year for global affairs records. As you can see, I've also tried to estimate the metrics. Again, these are complete estimates. It's very hard to get true numbers for this. 288 meters, if anyone's doing that in CN Towers, that's about half of the CN Towers. So it's still sizable. There's a lot of work to do there. But in terms of what we have over at Global Affairs, I can physically count that, and it is 6 meters, which is here to that screen about. Fairly different numbers there. But what I would like to also talk about, what we're finding in our declassification. So we've focused primarily on the records that are still held at Global Affairs in an effort to get them out and get them over to Library Archives. So in the last 2 years, we've really looked at those 400, 500 folders that pre-1972, and we're almost at the end there. We have just a couple dozen left to go. We did start in the early pandemic to try and look at some of our records over at Library Archives. There were some logistical issues with doing that, and we hope to work with Library Archives for this to go forward, to really work with that to get it solved. But what we're finding, I think the third point there is really interesting, because only about 10 to 15% of this information we believe is actually has any ongoing sensitivity. And the ongoing sensitivity that we're finding comes clearly in the form of what is known as Special Operational Information, or Security Information Act. That is covert intelligence, covert sources, targets, and methods, which when we come across, we don't really know how to declassify. Because right now, we don't have a legal or a policy or a procedural mechanism to do that. But what we're hoping is that well, there's a small bit, 10%. We have 500 records. So again, that's like a subdivision of a folder. So 500 records that are still sensitive to us. But that still leaves us almost 4,000 records that we would hope to send over here. And that we basically would have 80 to 90% of the records that we could declassify. We're hoping that by doing that, we will release a bit more to the, again, declassification and disclosure to the access to information should not necessarily be completed. There will still be some issues with the disclosure of this information. We do not do a privacy screen on this. There's all sorts of other information there, third-party information, such as client privilege information that may not be contributing to the classification of these records, but may inhibit their complete disclosure. But we do hope that 80% of those records can be at least declassified. We're also working with public safety on their declassification framework for some of these records. And of course, we also hope to really work with this institution to help facilitate the transfer and the getting access to these records to those users to see them. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and bring the panel session.
Okay, thank you all for that very thorough grounding in research guides and in First Khalifa and seeing our mountains of records. We have a microphone that should be making its way forward right now, so I'll invite members of the audience to line up if they have questions that they'd like to put to our panelists. And I think we have just under half an hour for a pretty sort of robust Q&A or discussion. I am so sorry. Sorry about that. So perhaps, as folks sort of ponder things that they'd like to ask from the microphone, maybe I'll put a quick question to our panelists, or a couple of quick questions. Alan, in the case of the research guide, do you see it as a resource where graduate students and researchers should go to sort of form ideas about projects? Or do you think it's a place to sort of refer back to sort of find the answers to research questions or find the places we can find those answers? So which sort of stage in the research process is it designed for? And perhaps for Liam and Melody, a question for both of you. Thank you. I am not quite as tall as Liam. Would you advise a conversation with archivists from Library and Archives Canada, from Global Affairs, before trying to sort of crack the code of these sort of information management systems to sort of give us a head start? And I will leave it there.
Okay, I'll start by responding. I mean, I think the research guide should be useful at all stages of research. Clearly, it would be helpful at the beginning, but so it will give researchers a much better idea of what's out there. It will give them a chance to see the range of material that they might request, and then form effective requests. So as specific as possible, so they're looking for very specific files. Those are much more effective for the ATIP staff to work with, and will lead to a more prompt response. So in terms of structuring your initial request, I think the database, the research guide would be extremely helpful. And then, of course, at any stage where you want to follow up other angles, that would be a place to look for sort of where there's additional information to complement what we're doing. So I think it'll be an invaluable tool. This brings together finding aids. I mean, it took essentially a couple of years to pull all these together, and a lot of digging around through paper files, a lot of talking to archivists, a lot of talking to different people in different departments, and a lot of ATIP requests to get a hold of some of these. So it's a valuable tool, and I hope it's a means for more people to get involved in research in this area in Canada.
That is a good question, Sam. At LAC, we have specialist archivists, so the portfolio archivist that knows their full, but we also have reference archivists. So if you anytime you have a question or you want to have guidance, do not hesitate to contact them. They will help you navigate the phone, and if they don't have the answer, they might contact the archivist, the portfolio archivist for more in-depth answer. But yeah, and if you have access to all the records that have been disclosed already by ATIP, don't just look at the record, look at the file number, look at the title of the files. This will be key to help you navigate other finding aids to find other files maybe related or similar. The more you look into it, the better you'll have an understanding, because the information is not just in the file, but it's also how the file has been filed.
I mean, I agree with all of those points. I think, I'm trying to put myself back to my time as a graduate student, and, I think trying to find what you really want to look into, sometimes the information is just not going to be there. And that's always disappointing, so you have to, but yeah, I think knowing your way around is definitely key.
Hi, so I'll leave this open to the panel, but it's mainly for Mr. Cooney. So at the end of your presentation, you had a part that said that declassification does not equal disclosure. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
I'm happy to. And I think this is a very, for me, a very important point. That government records, by and large, are classified. At some point, at the moment of creation, somebody looks at that record and says, what classification am I going to give this? And there are generally in the Government of Canada 4 classifications: unclassified, confidential, secret, top secret. And then there are also handling instructions and all sorts of things that go along with that. But declassification is essentially the inverse of that process. Declassification is saying at a later stage, normally once the originator is no longer around, no longer looking at those records. In our case, we're looking 50 years at least beyond that point. And basically doing that process again, looking at that record and saying, does this record still merit that classification, secret, top secret? And what we're finding is that about in 90% of those cases, it does not. And so the declassification is simply making that assessment that this can be declassified, that there's no, and I guess I should go back to one more step, that classification is based on the harm that would occur to the Government of Canada in the unauthorized release of that information. And so when you do that step again, and you look 50 years on and you say, if this information were released unauthorized, if I threw this into a waste paper basket and some, the janitorial staff came and picked it up and started publishing it in the Globe and Mail, would there be some harm to the Government of Canada in that? No, just point of fact, I'm not going to do that. There is no, that if we can declassify that, then suddenly it's a lot easier to disclose it. But disclosure is the second step. So in the ATIP process, by and large, we see the ATIP process as it is declassified because it is disclosed. I look at it as the other way. It is disclosed because it is declassified, and there is no more harm in that record. Now, we don't currently have any, unlike other Five Eyes governments, the UK, Australia, the US, and New Zealand, we don't have a process of actually like marking our records as declassified once they are declassified. So when you see something, oftentimes the only way they indicate that it's declassified is because it's somewhere on there that says this has been disclosed through ATIP, but it also says top secret. But we know because it's been disclosed through ATIP that it's top secret. That's I think that answers maybe most of your question, but it is the topic that I love to talk about, so if you want to chat with me afterwards, I'm totally happy to take the time and chat.
And I'd like to just follow up on that as well, because really this gets to the heart of what we're trying to discuss today. So Liam was talking about a declassification process that they're going through at Foreign Affairs, and that sounds very positive. But I guess the question I have is that it doesn't really get researchers any further ahead because that material still isn't released. So even when Liam and his colleagues have gone through the declassification process for their own internal purposes, which might mean that they don't have to store some of this material in unclassified storage facilities and so on, it still has to go through the ATIP process, and you still have to request it. And a bit of a distinction that Liam didn't make, but in the files that Foreign Affairs holds, there's a lot of material in there that actually was originated in D&D or other departments. So the declassification that he and his colleagues are going through only looks at the Foreign Affairs records. So that sort of provides a little bit of sort of a pre-clearance for when Foreign Affairs is ever asked for the release of these, but it still goes through the same kind of access process with the same time delays and consultations and all that sort of thing. So we will be talking about declassification, but I think it needs to be clear what that is, because it seems to me that most of the discussion about declassification that's taking place within government right now is essentially for internal government purposes, so that they can move stuff from top secret level to secret level and store it in less expensive storage facilities, but not actually make it available for research. So, I mean, that's the disconnect. I mean, it's a step in the right direction that somebody's at least looking at this material and realizing that it's no longer top secret. But we still have to go through the whole ATIP process, which is very cumbersome with obviously what we're discussing. So we have to keep that in mind in all of this. The situation obviously is much more complicated than that.
Just if I could add to that. Alan is right in many of his cases, in what he says. And I would point out that what we're hoping in the declassification, in our declassification initiative is, yes, we are not disclosing this information at the moment of declassification through an ATIP process, but we are hoping that it will reduce the consultation that we would have from that material being requested for an access to information process. To give you an example, just in the last in the last 6 months since the beginning of this fiscal year in April, I have processed 12,000 pages through ATIP, and roughly about 80% of that I've untouched with my highlighter pen, probably even closer to 90%. You know, about 10% of that is foreign material, which we can't release, it's not our material. Some of that is other government departments. The point being is that if that stuff were declassified, I would only have to look at 3,000 pages of that 12,000 pages, and 8,000 pages of that material would be processed, I would expect, primarily through Library and Archives ATIP, or our ATIP shop. And you know, we'd save a few trees. Yeah, so the ATIP shop, I think we will have discussions on the ATIP process, and maybe are reading that process, but I see the declassification as one of those steps to really reduce that volume of material that comes across my desk.
I just wanted to clarify a little something there. When we're talking classified, for those of you who are not aware, confidential means that the release of this will cause some harm to the interests of the nation. Secret means it'll cause grave harm to the interests of the nation, and top secret means it'll cause exceptionally grave harm to the interests of the nation, but it's all at the national interest level. Whereas for those of you who have ever looked in a government record, you'll find that there is a great deal more information, particularly the names of individuals who privacy is one of the key things that is being protected, and that's why it can't be open. And in fact, Library and Archives Canada has a specific section in the Privacy Act that allows this institution to release a great deal more, and that is not an opportunity that is open to Liam at Foreign Affairs, or GAC. So he has to deal with the reality that information that could be released if it was here cannot be released at GAC. So these are things that, that hamper it. But there are personal information, trade secrets, business information. All of these things are also found in government records and must be protected. So it's, when we're talking declassification, we are only seeing if the records continue to have a deleterious effect upon our national interest if it's released. But it is not taking into consideration anything else.
Thank you, Daniel. That's,
my name is Michael Petra. I'm a historian at the War Museum and was previously a journalist for many years. My questions is informed by both flags. I wonder if you can define harm and how that's, because my experience as a journalist and a historian is harm to national interest often means embarrassment to the politicians affected. So can you get into how this is decided upon?
So that, and I think that kind of gets to, I would point out that I have not, in my presentation, really used the word harm, because what I found in what we've, in what we're looking at is that the information that is still sensitive has to do with the fact that it falls under a different act, not the Access to Information Act. It falls under the Security of Information Act, and we suddenly have two acts that are competing with each other, and until so harm, there are different logograms and things that you can point to describe how it happens, but yeah, for our purposes, what we find is the harm is often stuff that is still sensitive because it refers to some sort of either covert activity or a relationship with our partner organization, either domestic or international, that we don't know whether they have released that. And that for us, I mean, again, we can't, there's equity in all sorts of places, so we don't know how to deal with that. And so.
And I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I guess I'd argue that national interest, in my experience, is very broadly and loosely defined when it comes to what's released. And again, I'd argue that often it's not national interest. It's image, it's embarrassment. I mean, everyone that's working in this field. I mean,
and we try very hard to make sure that we're not falling on the embarrassment side. That like if we are reading something that's it's kind of like embarrassing, but and I would point my colleague Sébastien there. I think would be bitter, perhaps speak more to that because he's in our ATIP shop and he's kind of my foil.
Thanks, Liam. I will also just note briefly that we do have a couple of dedicated ATI titles coming up as the day goes on, and so we can certainly get sort of further into these questions of harm and classification. I'll try to take over.
I'm Chris Manson from the Canadian Forces College. I'm used to dealing with departments like RCMP and D&D that have fairly aggressive destruction schedules at their departmental level. I spent a couple weeks at the BC Archives earlier this year going through Attorney General letters, and I'm convinced that in the 1990s and early 2000s, government was run by post-it notes and faxes. You know, records that we would call ephemeral. So I'm just wondering, could you say, you know, a lot of the discussion has been about retention and transfers to the Library and Archives of Canada, but can you say something about the departmental destruction schedules? And even once the records get the LAC, certainly in my research, a lot of the records have been destroyed after they've come to LAC or they've been transferred to other repositories too.
Get my hand as a portfolio archivist now. It's a great question. So, Government Archive Division, the portfolio archivist, usually, oh my god, I have to structure that answer, I'm so sorry. Okay, so within the law of LAC, there's a section about transfer and disposition of record. Disposition of record might mean destruction or transfer. I think it's section 13. So basically, as a portfolio archivist, we were good with task force to bring up to a speed with this disposition authorization. So we basically do an analysis of the department. What's the mandate, what's the operation, what do they do, and what's the highest level of record pertaining of those activities. And that's how we write down the disposition authorization. This is what, this piece of paper, this piece of document is provided to the department, and that's how they do their schedule for disposition. So either transfer when the retention period had expired, or destroy. Now, I know the word destruction can be scary. I did gag disposition, I did ports disposition, which I had no knowledge about. Now I do, because you have to go there and understand what do they do, how they function, how they manage anything, everything, and what is the most likely, which record has the most likely the information that is needed. Let me tell you, the public servant do produce a lot of document, a lot, and there is a lot of transitory record. Emails that does not have a decision doesn't need to be sent on the archive. Financial bills on buying 3,000 meters of paper toilet to go to the French embassy doesn't need to be transferred to the archive. So those are the kind of decision that has to be made. After that, the department with the archivist will work on a validation part where with the OPIs and OPI being the Office of Primary Interest, it will determine by section what really needs to be, they confirm what needs to be transferred or not. So we provide them the guideline of what is archival and what is not, and they go in their own shop and they apply those decisions to either their classification system, and if they don't have a classification system, they have to apply it to the area of activity that they are doing, because, and this is really, really important, not all departments IM are equal. Some are really good, some are less good. So yeah, I don't know if it answers your question, but that can explain. D&D is really, really, I mean, it's military, so it's really roted, so they have a fairly good manual. They love manuals, so they have an IM manual, a record-keeping manual, so it's easy to apply those. It's easier to apply those archival decision with the disposition time frame. Now, that's up to them. When, as a portfolio archivist, we tell them that it's not archival, it's up to them to destroy it. They don't need our approbation after we create those disposition authority. I think that's about it.
So I think just before we wrap up, can't resist asking one more question that I might open up to all of our panelists here, which is discuss how library and Archives Canada should always be the sort of first point of reference. But wondering if any of you have specific advice on where to look next if Library and Archives Canada doesn't have the sort of files available that we're looking for. What's the sort of next step in terms of sifting through the holdings of local affairs, CSE, DNDs, special registries?
Well, I'll start off on that. I mean, it really depends on the research you're doing, and that's why I think, again, the research guide would be a very good place to start. So you will have, the researcher will have a pretty good idea from there where the other resources are. So I don't think it's ever a case of this particular department will be obviously the first choice in all cases. It will depend very much on what you're looking for, where the record is likely to have been created in the first place. But as I said, when we're talking about these foreign intelligence records, these interdepartmental records, they can get spread around in a lot of different places. And so sometimes it's almost surprising where you can find the records. So for instance, there's a very large collection, a very sizable collection of records from the interdepartmental intelligence committees in the 1980s that was sent from the Solicitor General to LAC. So the Solicitor General department was part of this interdepartmental process. It didn't create any of these records, but it had all of the minutes, all of the various reports that were done by the interdepartmental intelligence community during that period. And it's a very complete record of what was happening for that decade. Now, I don't know what's happened to the SolGen records from before or after that, but maybe they're out there somewhere, maybe they've been destroyed, but at least for that 10 or 12 year period, there's a large volume of very useful records. But you don't really know that until David German points out that finding aid is available, and you can actually go through it and pull out what's of interest. So again, you need to start with the finding aids, find out where things are, and go from there.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, not to speak for my colleagues in our ATIP shop, but I think they're also very knowledgeable about kind of what records are held, particularly those who have been around for a while. And I think they're a very good point of contact, just to discuss informally whether it's worthwhile to put in a request.
Perfect. So I think we are just there at 10:30. So why don't we leave things there, continue this conversation over coffee and pastries, and everyone will reconvene for the 11 o'clock panel. Please join me in thanking all three of our outstanding
Juste une petite en rouge. Hein.